Hi, I'm Roddy Martin, Vice President of Supply Chain Product Marketing at Oracle. And I have with me Eric Domski, and I'm going to let Eric introduce himself. And we're going to talk about some of the changes that Eric has seen over the years in supply chain and what Oracle has to offer over the years. Eric.
Great, Roddy. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm North America Vice President of Supply Chain, covering all the supply chain planning, manufacturing, maintenance, and IoT applications that we're currently selling in the cloud.
Great. Now, over the years, you came in. You've worked for SAP. You came into Oracle through the Demantra acquisition. You must have seen phenomenal change when you take from the very heavy data-centric supply chain, foundation years back to now actually having S&OP in the cloud. Talk a little bit about that journey and how that's been dealing with clients and doing business development in supply chain.
Sure, Roddy. My roots actually go way back into the 90s. I mean, I have gray hair for a reason, right? Into manugistics. So, supply chain enterprise software has been part of my career from day one, actually coming out of college. But there's been tremendous changes throughout that period of time. I think, when I talk about our new applications in supply chain, I actually talk about them without using the word cloud. Okay, I talk about the business transformation and the unified architecture and what that really means. And quite frankly, if you take a look at how supply chain, enterprise supply chain software has evolved over this period of time, what we're going to market with is significantly different than what the rest of the market really is offering today.
And I think that's, that raises an interesting point. What I'm particularly heartened by at this event is the fact that, 65% of the attendees are from line of business. Now, 10 years ago, that was not the case at a supply chain event. People have real problems to solve. And pivoting from a supply-driven supply chain to a demand-driven supply chain with on-premise, multiple databases, multiple different versions of software is an absolute nightmare, which is why a lot of companies got stuck. However, now that we have an end-to-end supply chain solution and architecture in the cloud, you can actually start zeroing in on where is this company actually hurting so that I can get a beachhead and start selling. How much easier is that, and what sort of challenges do you have in the sales process? Because now you've got to sell to a line of business executive, and yes, you know what you're talking about in supply chain, but that's not generally the case in sales.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting the way we're almost flipping our conversations around with the line of business compared to when we're selling, let's say, VCP on-prem. Okay, the approach that I've been taking is, quite honestly, start with the demo. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And instead of killing people with, PowerPoint over PowerPoint to start a presentation like we typically have done, almost hiding the fact, the user interface and those things within VCP for various reasons. What we found most effective, quite honestly, is do a brief spot demo for whatever end-to-end process they're talking about. End-to-end can start anywhere and finish anywhere, but show them the glimpses, show them the highlights of what's different, right? And then you can go back and tell the story about where is this all coming from, but at least they have a picture in their mind as something to connect it with. And quite frankly, I always schedule this with all my meetings, 15-minute demo, please don't ask any questions. We're going to get into the detail, go end to end, then talk about the story. And then we say we're going to do a detailed demo afterwards. 70% of the time, by the time we get to a detailed demo, they're like, hey, we saw what we're talking, we get it. They get it. These are for initial meetings. What I say, how do you create a hook? Right? How do you create a hook to do deeper dive discovery? And then you really have to get into the meat of the demo, and that's what we've all been doing for years and years. But to create the differentiation, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and that's been hugely successful, at least in any of the meetings I've been involved with, and my team is taking on that approach as well.
That's very interesting that you talk about tell the story, and I think that's the new sales approach, right? If you can't tell the sales story of supply chain or the supply chain story, why is it so important to transform to demand driven? Not what is cloud, you don't start the sentence with what is cloud. You talk the story about, why are supply chains transforming. The other point that I love that you make, and that is that, you've got to dangle the hook in the water. Guess what? Fish don't bite hooks with no bait on them, right? So that's the story. You've got to put meaty stories on that hook, and then the fish will come and bite. So that's fantastic. It was great talking to you, Eric. Eric really understands supply chain, and it's good to work with salespeople that do understand supply chain, because it makes all of our lives much more interesting, and we can spread the load. Thanks, Eric.
Great. Thank you very much, Roddy.